pretty quick. We're going to go out to India. Hard, he, him, is asking us some thoughts on consciousness and divinity. And hey, how you doing? You're chatting it up with Forrest and SR.
Yeah, hi, Forrest and SR. My name's Hard, and yeah, I had this question about consciousness from the standpoint of biology, basically. In the sense of how do you conceptualize consciousness? In the sense of what is consciousness? If you define it as the state of being aware, okay, what is and isn't aware? How do we decide that? Then if we decide that, then we what makes something conscious? And then I think that's I suppose the strongest argument you could make for divine. For clarification, I'm agnostic, but I guess this is, from my perspective, the strongest argument you could make for a god or a godlike being. But I wanted to know what you think. Is consciousness just the product of maybe chemical reactions between your neurons? And if it is, what makes the emergent property of consciousness different from the emergent property of any other chemical reaction, like metabolism or respiration? What do you think, Forrest or SR?
Oh, Forrest is definitely going to get the bulk of this. This is his wheelhouse, so I'll tack on one or two cute sentences near the end. But go ahead, please.
I actually want Forrest a lot. He's yeah.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head by calling it, an emergent property, because you think about the tide. What is how do you get a scoop of the tide? Can you go have a bottle of Tide or something like that? The tide is the emergent property of all these water molecules all together, and the moon, and all. It's just something that's happening as a result of all these things put together. And it's the same thing with consciousness. You can have one single neuron firing and not call it consciousness. But if you have sufficient amount of them all doing something, then you come up with this state, which generally is defined as just awareness and response to deliberate response to your surroundings. The response to your surrounding in any way, shape, or form is part of the qualifications of what we call something alive. And so adding on to that, this awareness of what it means to respond and what your surroundings actually are, that's where you get into the realm of consciousness. And that is 100% just governed by the shape and structure and electrical activity in your brain. And we can demonstrate that. There's this famous story of Phineas Gage, which if you've ever even heard the word neuroscience, you've probably heard the story of Phineas Gage. Is a super common, a famous case study of this guy that had his frontal lobe obliterated in a mining or in a railroad accident. So a bunch of dynamite went off. It blasted a metal rod through his head, and it was super heated, so it cauterized everything on the way out. And so this guy just had an instant frontal lobotomy. And was able to literally walk away from it and completely changed as a person. Before this happened, he was kind and respectful, hardworking, sober, responsible. After this happened, he was sexually aggressive, rude, mean, predatory, cruel, lazy. Just all of his basal animal instincts came out basically when he lost the personality, thinky parts of his brain. And this was kind of the beginning of neuroscience. We were turns out different parts of the brain seem to control different things. And this is a gross oversimplification of this stuff. But
so it's how we used to think stuff in your health is controlled by these things called humors. You just and so if you want to get healthy, just let some stuff out. But then we realize, there's organs in here that do stuff.
Exactly. We used to think that we used to think if you had an illness, you probably had too much blood. Or not, or something, it was just, we had this imbalance of humors. And so, this was one of those things that kind of led us down the path of realizing there's a lot more going on here. And again, that's just the famous example. There's a million and one more where you have somebody who's one kind of person, gets kicked in the head, and then they're a different kind of person. You have brain damage that does this. There's a reason why a massive percentage of death row inmates who are there for violent crimes have a history of frontal lobe damage or brain damage in general. There's a reason why people like football players have a tendency to become violent and having domestic abuse problems because they have history of head injuries. And so when we look at what consciousness is, we can be sure that it's just a thing that happens in brains. That doesn't mean that we have it all figured out. I can explain to you when a neuron fires, there's this sequence called an action potential, which is where you have sodium influx, and then you have this spike of charge, and then you have potassium efflux, where it goes down and hyperpolarizes, and then has to balance out and repolarize. And you have that little beep boop kind of like configuration. Like, we can talk about all these chemical steps that lead up to the firing of a neuron. We can talk about what happens at an axon terminal when you dump neurotransmitters into a synapse, and what kind of effect that's going to have. We're able to make drugs and do treatments and things because of this understanding. But if you ask us what is the initial cause of this sodium moving, that what's the thing that causes the thing that causes the thing that causes the beginning of the thought, we're kind of left out in the cold. We don't, there's a little bit of gap in our knowledge there. But as usual, that gap in knowledge is not enough reason to say, okay, well, then there must be something supernatural. It just means we haven't learned this.
That's an ignorance fallacy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you had asked us, 60 years ago how any of this works, we wouldn't have had step 2, 3, 7, 9, anything. And now we have like all but step 2. And so, there's a lot of people out there, well, then it must be God. It's like, no, that's not how it works. Right. So yeah, that's the long and short of it, bro. It is just the function of your brain. And if your brain were different, your mind would be different. And no amount of permutations will recreate exactly who you are right now.
Yeah, like the thing is, even after all of this, I'm having a difficult time like getting an actual definition of consciousness, because here's the thing.
Sure.
What does it mean to be aware? What does it mean what are the practical implications of being aware? Like, what does that mean?
Welcome to philosophy and neuroscience in
Right.
grad school. We don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
unfortunately, we've been talking about that for a while, Hard. And we've narrowed it. We've gotten the focus to such a place where there's a lot of stuff that we used to think about that doesn't exist anymore. But again, I mean, exactly what Forrest was saying, there is still a lot of information that we don't know, and more understanding of that will benefit us. So like I know, and please, Forrest, tell me if I'm wrong on this, or if you've heard anything about this or whatever, but there's more study going on to like how the spinal cord is relating to consciousness. Am I
I don't know.
Okay,
that's not my
That's
area.
a Shannon Q thing.
Yeah, I'm not up to date on the literature, but I can say that we have found some really freaking cool stuff in like peripheral, like in your peripheral nervous system, that's like weirdly related. And we've also found stuff about your microbiome that's shockingly influential over your brain. Yeah,
like the stuff in your gut.
Yeah, the microfauna living in your guts actually have a significant impact on your personality.
Right.
And your metabolism and everything else. So like, yeah, the brain's like it, as we talked about in the end of the last call, everybody, I love brains very much, but people like to pretend like they're magic, and they're not.
Yeah.
They're just another organ. And just like the rest of your body, if you ever study anatomy and physiology, you learn how everything is connected in a really, really intimate way. And so if you're talking about the nervous system, there's a big part of it that you need to relate to the digestive system, or to the endocrine system, or to the skeletal system comes into it sometimes, or the integumentary system. They're all connected in a beautiful way. Yeah.
I gotta have you ever watched Full Metal Alchemist? I think like one quote from that really sums it up. Yeah. It says, all is one is all. It's basically like everything is like different, but it's still connected in one way, and like without all of it, it like wouldn't work. So like, I suppose that sums it up pretty well, right?
I've never watched the show, but I get the vibe of it from what I've seen, and I get that quote. So yeah, I would agree. It is all connected in chemical ways, in biological ways, in really, really, really cool ways. And you can expand that out and come up with a really neat quasi-spiritual experience talking about biogeochemical cycles, how it's also connected to literally everything else on the planet. It's dope, dude. And there's a lot to think about there. You were asking great questions, and I think if you were to take those questions into somebody who's has expertise in this field, I've studied neuroscience at the collegiate level, but it's not my area of expertise. It's not where I specialize. So like, if you were talking to somebody who's a specialist in this, they'd probably have more interesting things to say. But as far as I know, you're still at that limit of understanding where it's like, yeah, but like, actually, what is it? I don't know. We're kind of lost on that. We're figuring it out.
Yeah. And if I can, I'm a big fan of trying to give our callers some homework hard. You can also just tell me to go screw myself. But two people that come to mind in this discussion, two people that always come to my mind, and not saying that everything they write is perfect or anything, but just saying maybe it's a next step for you. Look up some stuff by Patricia Churchland and Donald Hoffman. Both of them I know do talk about this, and they have interesting thoughts, and maybe that'll just lead you down a nice little trail to get even more information on it. And heck, maybe you come back and give us a call in a few weeks and explain it to us. Like, we always love that. So
I always love recommending Robert Sapolsky as well. Robert Sapolsky is my freaking hero, dude.
Yeah, we'll be back. Thank you for that. Also, just one more thing. Like, this is going off of like, you know, how stuff is connected. A bit of an unrelated topic though, but this is something Forrest talks a lot about, and this is basically trans people. And like, I actually had a theory explanation for this about trans people in the context of human behavioral ecology. Would you like to hear that?
We've got a couple of other calls, Hard, but I do think that's something that would probably be an interesting discussion in the future. So just give us a call back next time you see Forrest or myself on. Because I always love to take time to talk about why properly applied skepticism leads you to being an ally of the LGBTQ. I fully believe that. I stand on that. I love that. And so, yeah, let's have that conversation next week or in the future. But we're going to let you go for now, Hard, but thank you so much. And again, look up those people that Forrest and I were talking about, and hopefully it becomes a fun experience, and you can just nerd out and find out all the cool stuff about the brain. So.